Yeah, so hello and welcome to another episode of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I'm your host for today, Jeremy Hughes. And just a reminder for those who've been tuning in, but for those who may not know, February at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants has been dedicated solely to amazing women in science, exploration, conservation, and adventure, which is super cool. And we are having an amazing lineup of speakers join us for the rest of the month, including Energy Week until the 24th. And today we're joined by a very special person, Dr. Ayana Johnson, and I'll give you a bit of a spiel about her before she gets started. So Dr. Johnson started with a BA in Environmental Science and Public Policy from Harvard. She holds a Ph.D. from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, which is just a little bit down the road from some of our California classes in marine biology. She's worked on countless projects in environmental and ocean policy and protection, is the founder of Ocean Collectiv, a strategy consulting firm for conservation solutions rooted in social justice. Not only that, but she's also an adjunct professor at NYU, inspiring college and university students such as myself to continue into the sciences. She does much, much more that I'll let herself talk about so I can stop blabbering. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the stage over to Dr. Ayana Johnson.
Thank you so much. I wasn't blabbering at all. Can everyone hear me okay? Or can you hear me okay since everyone else is muted? Okay, great.
Right ahead.
I am talking to you all right now from the Harvard Club in the middle of New York City. I was in a phone booth that was really dark because I'm not in an office today. So I'm glad you can all see and hear me. And I put together some photographs to share with you, to tell you about the work I'm doing. So I'm going to share my screen somehow here. Okay. Let's see. All right, can you see my screen in your own faces? Okay, great. So here we go. So yes, I am a marine biologist, and if you want to find out more about me later, you can look me up on Twitter or Instagram. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. So I decided I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was 5 years old. A little bit older than this picture. This is me with my parents in my backyard in Brooklyn, where I grew up. And my favorite stuffed animal was a stuffed toy fish that I used to love to make fish faces and try to impersonate this fish. And I just fell in love with the ocean and decided I wanted to become a marine biologist. But it wasn't only the animals that I was interested in. Whoops, that slide didn't work at all. Well, you can see there's lots of different fish here, but this was supposed to be animated, but the point is that my interest started with fish, and I'm still interested in fish, although octopuses are my favorite creature because they're so smart and they have 3 hearts and they're amazing. But I started out being really interested in fish and then realized that the fish are doing everything right. They swim around, they're trying to find food, they're trying not to become someone else's food and get eaten by a bigger fish, make babies so they have the next generation. It's people that are really the challenge. And so I went from studying fish to studying people. And this was the first project I did that really bridged that gap between studying fish and studying people. So this is a fish trap, a diagram of a fish trap, and these are used by fishermen all over the world to catch fish. So they're usually made out of wood or metal, and the fish swim in that funnel in the middle, and they can't find their way back out, and they get stuck. And so a lot of baby fish get stuck in there, which is no good. And skinny little fish that nobody wants to eat because they're not big enough yet. Or the species that are like Nemo that are never going to be fat enough to be like a really delicious meal that fishermen don't want to catch. So I did an experiment with these red corners of the trap where you put a hole in the side, basically, and the skinny fish and the baby fish can get out. So I want to show you a short video, not that video, I think this video, of how that works. So you can take a look at what that looks like.
For hundreds of years, people have been fishing on coral reefs to feed their families and make a living.
Can you hear this?
Tradition has been passed down from generation to generation. It used to be that on a good day, supply a whole market. Everyone was happy. But because of unsustainable fishing, catches in a lot of places have declined.
There seems to be a lot of extra fish over there. What about those fish? Yeah, what about those fish?
Those fish are called bycatches. These traps catch additional fish that have no market value. Unfortunately, it's the way it works.
Oh, you're talking about these old traps. There's a way to make these traps better now.
To make my trap better?
Yeah, it's easy to change your current trap into a better trap.
I haven't heard anything about a better trap.
I haven't heard anything about a better trap. I mean, there's a better trap. Oh, there's a better trap. Check it out. All right, with your old trap, you're catching the fish you want, your groupers and snappers, but you're also catching the fish you don't want, juveniles, herbivores, ornamental fish. These fish are really important to the reef. I mean, if you keep fishing this way, your reef will eventually look like this. This new trap is really just a simple design change to your existing trap. It's retrofitted with these vertical, rectangular escape caps, which allow for narrow-bodied, compressible, and juvenile fish to escape. It reduces your bycatch by up to 80%.
Oh,
yeah? Yep. Now the juveniles have a chance to grow up, date, mate, and make more fish. And the herbivores keep working, which keeps your reef healthier. And if you switch to this new trap, eventually you end up with bigger fish, up to 31% bigger on average. Wow. Yeah, this new design really works.
Okay. Sounds great. About the bottom line.
Okay, let's talk about the bottom line. People who use these new traps make the same amount of money as people who use the old traps. And it helps preserve their reef by maintaining a really healthy ecosystem.
So, what's the downside?
Yeah, what's the downside?
Yeah, what's the downside?
There's no downside. It's easy to retrofit the traps. The fish are bigger. It's cheap to do.
But there's always a downside.
Well, you can't put your escape caps on the downside. That's a downside.
Because then the fish couldn't escape.
Okay?
So, do you have a name for this new trap?
Yeah, I call this new trap better. Yeah.
So could you hear that? The soundtrack of that?
I could. I think our classrooms could. I hope so.
Maybe? Did that work?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that was my first big experiment, and it was really interesting for me to think about that. And that's how I started to think about ocean conservation as really being about people, about the communities, about how people use fish. And that project was so exciting because I was able to do a bunch of diving and work with the local fishermen and think about all of that. So ocean conservation for me is about people, because the ocean will be fine without us, but we will not be fine without the ocean. So I started spending a lot more time with fishermen, asking them a ton of questions about what it was like, what it used to be like, what the problems were, what the solutions were, trying to understand their way of life. So this is a photograph of me in Curacao, which is on the southern part of the Caribbean, near Venezuela, an island of about 150,000 people. And I'm just sitting on the side of the road while these guys are selling their fish, asking them tons and tons of questions. And so I learned so much from talking to these fishermen. And I think that's a really important part of science, is talking to the communities and the people that your science could affect. So science doesn't just happen in a lab. The results of your research has big impacts on people, how that research gets used. So I wanted to make sure that I was using science to help these communities. And so the next project I did was with the Waitt Institute, where I used to be executive director. So I'm going to show you a little video about that so you can see what it's like in Barbuda. It's really beautiful. And this project was about ocean zoning, which I'll explain a little bit more in a minute after this.
And on my screen, I think it's frozen. You just start pausing and playing the video again. And on my screen, you're frozen with the video. If you could try just pausing it and playing it again.
Oh, no.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, you said I'm frozen?
Yeah, just try playing one more time.
Start it over?
Yeah, maybe start it from the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay.
I believe it's frozen again. Uh-oh. I think if you try exiting out of full screen,
Okay.
might not have that problem. Just keeping it in your player. Yeah, that's good.
Oh, man. All right, one more time.
We'll work through it. I hope this is the one. It's good so far.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay, did that work? Hopefully that time.
Yeah, awesome. There was no delays that time.
Great. Well, moving right along. So there's a lot that that I want to tell you about that project, but some of the things you'll notice from that video, there are lots of different people in it. We spent time in the water. We talked with the politicians and the prime minister. We talked with the fishermen. We made maps. It was really an interesting project for a year and a half. I basically lived on this little island of Barbuda, working with them to figure out how to use their ocean without using it up, as it says in the video. So what does it really mean to be sustainable? How can they keep catching fish now, but also have some fish for later? So we designed a program that would work for them. And this is what most of my work looks like. The rest of the presentation is just photos showing you all of the different things a marine biologist does that are not, it's not all about being in the lab, and it's not all about being underwater. A lot of it for me is using science to talk to people. So in this photo, you can see there's some guys sitting at a table. They were playing dominoes, and we were showing them different maps, different plans for zoning. And so on land, you have zoning where there are areas that are parks, and there's areas where there's factories, and there's areas where you live. And you can do the same thing for the ocean, so that there's a plan for how to use all the different ocean spaces. So I pulled together this team of scientists and lawyers and filmmakers to help with this project. And I started a summer camp for the kids there, which was really fun to teach them about the ocean. They didn't know that much about the fish and other things that lived in the waters right by their houses. And then this is what happened. So we had a first draft that the local government came up with, and then the fishermen took a look at it and said, that doesn't work for us at all. And they came up with a second draft that's about the same amount of blue, it's just divided in different ways. So the fishermen were really concerned about protecting areas that had mangroves that were really important for the baby fish to grow. And they wanted to make sure that boats were only anchoring in places that were sand, so that they weren't hurting the coral reefs. And that's the green areas. And they wanted to make sure no one was using nets on the reefs. And that comes in the third draft. The pink is all the coral reefs. When they said all of that should be a place where you can't use nets. So over the course of a year and a half, we came up with all these different drafts. The community drew all of the different drafts, and we helped with all the technology and the science behind it. And I had a million conversations with people to see what would work best for them. And so this is the final version. This is ocean zoning. So you'll see the island of Barbuda in the middle, and they have control over the water out to 3.45 miles from land. So that's the boundary. And then there's these blue striped areas. Those are sanctuaries. Those are no fishing. And then the pink areas are no, this key is actually wrong. The pink areas are for no nets, and the green areas are places where you can anchor. And then there's a little purple area on the bottom where that's where the ships come and go. And so you don't want to have people, you want to have an area for ships that's not where people are also swimming or fishing, because then you'll have lots of crashes. So this is what the biggest project I've ever worked on. And it was really exciting because the government signed new laws that made all of this required. And they also required that, that fish trap with the escape slots as part of their fishing regulations. So then we went on to launch this project back in Curacao, where I had done the fish trap research. So it was on Barbuda and Curacao, and then island of Montserrat as well. So 3 different Caribbean islands, and the project is still happening, working with the community and the government to make sure that their ocean is really healthy for the long term. And I'm not working on this project anymore, but I'm still really proud that I was a part of it and really excited that it's still happening. And now I do a lot more public speaking. So this was at the Smithsonian. I gave a big talk about the importance of conserving nature, because people depend on it so much, and not, and in particular, poor communities and communities of color by the coast who don't have anywhere else to go when the sea level is rising, when the water is polluted, when there's not enough fish left for them to eat, when the storms are getting worse because of climate change. It's really important to me to take care of coastal communities, not just in the Caribbean, but all over the world. And so the title of this talk, as you can see on that big slide there, is The Need for Ocean Justice. So how can we be really fair about protecting the ocean in a way that benefits everybody? And then I helped to organize the March for Science last year, which was over 1 million people all over the world coming together to say, science is really important. We think government should listen to scientists when they think about how to make policies. So you can see me there with some of my friends who were the organizers of this really big march. And that was a really exciting thing to be part of, to help scientists figure out how they can speak out about the importance of science, about how science serves the common good. It's good for all of us to have a better understanding of the way the world works in so many ways. First, we can be healthy so that we can breathe clean air and clean water and have good medicine and all of that. And so I've been doing a lot of speaking, and this is about the impacts of climate change in the ocean. This photograph was taken in the middle of Times Square, a few blocks from where I am now, talking about the impact of climate on the oceans. The air and the oceans are really much more connected than most people know. So the oceans have actually absorbed over 90% of the excess heat that we've created in the atmosphere through global warming, which is this layer of greenhouse gases that's kind of like a blanket over the planet that traps all this heat. And so a lot of that heat is getting absorbed by the ocean, which is changing a lot of things in the ocean, which is a really big concern, because just like you and I have like a certain temperature, so do the fish and the plants that live in there. They don't like to get too hot. And so this is me interviewing the CEO of the Nature Conservancy, asking him some really tough questions. And this is one of my favorite things to do, is ask important people really hard questions, because I think it's such a great opportunity to help people think in new ways, think outside of the box, and be more creative when it comes to thinking about solutions for all these different challenges that the ocean is facing. So the goal of all of my work is to use the ocean without using it up, because we still need to eat fish, and we still obviously want to go swimming and have beach vacations, and we want fishermen to have jobs, and we want coastal communities to be safe. So that's why I do what I do. And that is all I have to show you in terms of the slides. But I'm really excited to answer whatever questions you have. I'm just going to move this back to the first slide so we have something to look at while we chat. And that photograph, the place where I am in this picture, is Barbuda. That's one of the most beautiful views I've ever seen. And so there are some really nice parts of being a marine biologist, and you get to go to some stunningly beautiful places.
Wow, what a beautiful scene, and what an amazing talk. Thanks so much for all that information, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you.
We're going to open it up to questions from our classmates, and we're going to start with Cameron's class.
They're starting with our class.
Oh, so quick question. Do I go up?
So we're unmuted.
Right on.
What is your favorite thing about being a marine biologist?
Ooh. It's a really good question. I guess I would say my favorite thing about being a marine biologist is that it connects to so many other things. So when I think about being a marine biologist, I get to learn all about all these amazing creatures that live in the ocean, but I also get to talk to people and figure out how to solve problems. So I guess I would say my favorite thing about being a marine biologist is helping people solve problems, but from this perspective of a scientist.
Great question.
Can we ask another one? Yeah. Can we ask another one? Quick. Go onto the camera. You can't see you.
Okay. What's one of your most challenging things in your job?
What is the most challenging? I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen so I can see you guys. Does anyone have tips for this? Show participants. There we go. Hello. I think the most challenging thing is technology, apparently. Trying to figure out how to use all these different tools. The most challenging thing about my job is explaining the science in ways that gets people really excited about it and makes people care. And so I think the thing that would be most surprising to people is the skill that I use the most every day is writing. It's really important to be a good writer so that you can explain marine biology and ocean conservation to other people. Because if you know a lot about it but aren't really good with words, you can't talk about it to other people. So writing, I think, is hard, but it's really exciting to when you get your ideas out there and people get to understand new things.
Awesome. Thanks.
One more. Okay, they might come back.
Okay, thanks. So we're going to move on to Miss Nunez's class. Sure, Miss Nunez.
Hi.
Serious things I'm not.
Hello.
Hello. One question. I've wondered is what types of fish. Sorry. What types of fish have you helped the most? And is overfishing of these fish going to cause an environmental shift?
That's a great question. The fish that I have tried to help the most is the parrotfish. So they're called that because they have a beak that's kind of like a parrot, and they eat dead coral and they eat algae, and they keep the reefs clean. So they keep the algae from growing all over the corals, and they poop sand from eating the dead coral. They grind it up into sand. So a lot of times when you're at the beach, you're actually walking on parrotfish poop if you're in the tropics. So it's really an important fish for coral reefs. And sorry, there's some background noise here. So that's one of the fish that the fish trap was designed to protect, and there are now laws in a few countries to protect parrotfish, in part because of the work that I've done. But yes, overfishing is definitely a problem.
What excites you most about your job?
Gosh, I have a lot of answers. So the really silly answer is that one of my favorite things to do is to jump off of boats into the ocean. I just think it's super fun. But what excites me most is being able to help change laws. I think a lot of people who do ocean conservation think about how do we raise awareness and how do we make people care. But at the end of the day, if you don't change the laws and the policies, then people can still do whatever they want. So when I can help to get laws changed, I think that's really exciting because you're totally changing the rules.
Great questions, guys. That was from Miss Noon's class. We're going to move on to Miss Baraja's class, who's joining us from Oxnard, California, a little further down the coast. If you guys have any questions, go right ahead. Baraja's class, do you guys have any burning questions?
Yeah. What was the weirdest fish you have encountered?
Ooh. Weirdest fish. There's a fish that's called the frogfish that like sits on the bottom, and it's really good at camouflage. And when you notice it, it's crazy because it looks kind of like a sea sponge. And those are really fun. I also think sharks are really cool. They're a pretty neat kind of a fish. Gosh, how would you pick one? But yeah, I think pufferfish are really cool too with all their spines, and they like puff up to protect themselves. There's a million sorts of really cool and very weird fish.
Tough question to answer. Anyone else with a question from Mrs. Baraja's class?
Have you ever been attacked by a fish?
I don't think so. I think I've been like, there's a kind of fish called a damselfish, and they basically farm these gardens of algae on coral reefs. And if you get in their garden, they get really mad. They're little fish. They're like the size of your hand or smaller. And when you get into their little garden area, they get really mad and they try to chase you away, and they will like bite you a tiny bit. But I wouldn't really call it an attack. It was like a gardener telling me not to step on the grass, basically.
Yes, damselfish are very territorial, especially if you've done work on parrotfish who are herbivores.
Oh, yes.
Lots of animosity there. Thanks for those questions from Ms. Baraja's class. And we're going to move on to our last class, Ms. Smith's. Ms. Smith's grade 6s from Houston, Texas. If you guys have a question for Ayana, go right ahead.
Okay, so my question is, have you ever encountered the mimic octopus?
Could you repeat that again? Have you ever encountered?
My question is, have you ever encountered the mimic octopus?
Oh, good question. And actually, we just lost Ayana, so we're going to wait for her to come back. But I can tell you a little bit about. Oh, there she is.
Hello. Sorry.
Hi. Okay, we lost.
I blew it.
From Miss Smith's class, have you ever encountered the mimic octopus?
Yes. Sadly, my answer is no. I've seen lots of videos of them on the internet. Sometimes when I'm feeling sad, I watch videos of the mimic octopus because it's like probably the coolest creature on the planet. So, yeah, I guess that's still on my list of things to do.
That was a quick and easy answer. Any other questions from Miss Smith's class?
What got you into wanting to be a marine biologist?
So when I was little, when I was 5 years old, I went to Florida on a family vacation, and my parents taught me how to swim, and I went on a glass bottom boat. They make these boats that are glass on the bottom, so you can actually see through the bottom of the boat to see the coral reef and all the fish. And it was like visiting aliens. It was like seeing a whole nother world. And I was so amazed by it that I just fell totally in love with the ocean and decided to become a marine biologist. And I started a shell collection, and I went to the aquarium, and I got to hold, sometimes in the aquarium they have like an area where you can touch like starfish and other things. And I held a sea urchin in my hand, and sea urchins have like 1,000 little like tube feet on the bottom, and they're like little suction cups. Imagine like an octopus's suction cups, but like all really tiny, and they all kind of move together to slowly get across the ocean. And I felt that on the palm of my hand, and I just knew that I needed to understand way more about how the ocean worked.
Awesome. Great suite of questions from Ms. Smith's class.
Looks like there's another one there. This guy standing up.
Yeah. Ms. Smith's class, do you have one more question there? Sorry, at the front in the gray shirt.
What is your favorite fish and why?
Gosh, these questions, it's like impossible to choose. It's like asking a parent to choose which kid is their favorite kid, or your teacher to choose which is her favorite student. Which is my favorite fish and why? I think the parrotfish might be my favorite fish, but I've already told you about them. So I'm going to think of another one. Oh, I think the flounders are really interesting. A flounder is a flatfish that swims right across the bottom of the ocean. And because it's always like down all the way in the sand, when they are little babies, they have two eyes in front, just like us. But as they grow older, if they had an eye on each side, they would have one here and one here. And when they lay down in the sand, one of their eyes would be in the sand. So that eyeball, as they grow up, it moves over to the top. So they have two eyes on the top, and they're really flat and they're crazy looking. And I think it's really cool to watch them swim. And they have, some of them have like a bioluminescence. They have these like blue circles around them that, like, when they get excited or you scare them because you sneak up on them, they get all these like blue spots like a cheetah. And that's really cool to see.
Okay, and just for the sake of time, I'm going to relay a question that we just typed out from Ms. Cameron's class. They're asking, do you still eat fish even though you study them?
Sometimes, not as much as I used to, because I know so much about them, and not just know about like the facts of their biology, but I know a lot about how overfished a lot of the species are. A lot of them are just, there aren't that many left of some of the species. So I don't eat tuna, because eating tuna is like eating a dragon that eats lions. It's like so many steps up the food chain. So if you imagine like in Africa where you have the grass and you have the antelope that eat the grass and you have the lion that eats the antelope, a tuna would be like the dragon that eats the lion. It's like the king of the jungle. And so we would never expect to live off of wild lions on land, but we expect all 8 billion people on the planet to be able to eat tuna. And I know that's not sustainable in the long term. And also because it's so high up the food chain, there's a lot of toxins that accumulate because they're eating so many small fish. So when I eat seafood, I try to eat lower on the food chain, and I try to eat smaller fish because they're generally healthier for me. So I eat sardines and anchovies, and I eat mussels and clams and oysters because they're farmed and they are filter feeders. So they just like take their nutrition right out of the water, and they actually make the water more clear. So you're helping the ocean when you eat oysters.
Tough question, great answer. So I think we have one last question from Mrs. Baraja's class. I see a hand in the front there.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a whale shark?
I have never seen a whale shark in person. I've never seen a mimic octopus, and I've never seen a whale shark. And apparently my job isn't done yet. I should keep being a marine biologist until at least I get to do those two things, right?
I've never seen a whale shark either, and I hope to. So thank you very much, classroom, for all those questions and those amazing yet tough answers from we're gonna, as tradition at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, all the mics, noise, and the seats,
Oh, we're not kidding. So, yeah, you say thank you and wait. Thank you.
Konnichiwa.
Bye, guys.
So fun to chat with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for our classes and to our speaker, Ayana Johnson. And as always, we have amazing speakers coming up still to the end of February for celebrating amazing women in science exploration, adventure, and conservation. So stay tuned.